cultural responsiveness and market responsiveness. I advise you to think about that seriously because it's not clear to me what the vision is for all of you in this room as to what Fort Monroe should be. I should say I'm from New York State, lived in Massachusetts, and I've been in Virginia for 6 years, so I'm kind of new to this. But I love Fort Monroe. I think it's one of the national treasures on the East Coast at least, and one of the most exciting places that I've visited in the United States, okay? So that's my investment. So I think there's this balance between this, and I hope that you would come up with the right balance. I'm not saying it has to be one or the other, but I'm struggling, and as a citizen, I'm not convinced the people in the room and convince me which direction we are going, and that concerns me. The second part of this is the housing sector component. I heard Building 5 was proposed as a Section 8, and my wife, who is a physician, and some of you may see her at Riverside, her mother was on welfare at one point, so when she was a kid. So I'm not sure what that comment about Section 8 was meant to be. But affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean bad. I didn't hear any discussion about keeping Fort Monroe affordable. I've looked at a number of the properties, including one of the houses next to the big one with the columns, and I know how much that costs. And I've looked at one on Bernard Street, and I know how much that costs. Those rates, even for renting, are not affordable for most people who work in the Hampton Roads. So I'm concerned about how do you do this. I'm from Massachusetts. We have a thing up there was called 40B, which was for municipalities with less than 10% affordable housing. You had to ensure that you did something to make sure the housing was at least accessible to all socioeconomic concerns. I can afford to buy a house in Fort Monroe, just to let you know. I can. So I'm not thinking about just me. I'm thinking about other people who will not be able to, who can afford to rent here today. Okay? So third point, I didn't hear anything about what you're doing to cultivate small businesses, veterans-owned business. Many veterans since when was this in 1619? It was a military base. Many veterans over the centuries have served here. What are we doing to make this a place that welcomes small businesses for veterans? What are we doing about making this place welcome and supportive to cultivate women's small business, a minority-owned small business? I heard no discussion about all of that in all of your plans. And my last point was, I'm glad I showed up last night and most of this morning because there was very little color in this room. Hampton, from when I was moving to Hampton, I'm come from Massachusetts, 5% is African American. I came down to Hampton and I found out that I lived in a city that's nearly half of the population in the city of Hampton is African American. I was a little disappointed that the board, the FMA board, doesn't have, I think you and Dr. Harvey represents the African American representation, and those are specific individuals, but there's not enough diversity on your board. And I don't know the membership of your Fort Monroe Foundation. I suspect it probably isn't very much. I can tell you this, the residents on this side, in this Fort Monroe, I know many of my colleagues and friends, I spend a lot of time over here. It's not very diverse. A lot of people come here of socioeconomic and racial ethnic groups to fish on the pier, which we want to put a parking fee on, but those are not very, I'm a little disappointed in those things. So those are concerns that I have, okay? And thank you all.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.